It's Monday, September 9th, 2024. That means it's time for the Knee Jerks podcast of Eno, Nick, and Big Al. I am the Big Al of that equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is my longtime partner in crime. He has got lots on his plate. Like I said, we've both been doing a lot of traveling, so we haven't been recording over the past month or so. But Greg, you're back in town. You are you have a familiar background. You're back home after traveling for much of August, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, Al Beaton. We are in year 15 of this program, and rarely have we taken as much time off as we have the past 4 to 6 weeks. But it's vacation time. Nobody knows that better than Ken Kal, our guest. We'll talk about that. But it was fun to be away. It was fun to go camping and be with the family. But gosh, all of a sudden you blink and it's September, and of course, follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and please subscribe to my weekly Substack. I would appreciate that. GregEno.substack.com. I come into your inbox every Monday. I just did a piece a little while ago about the Lions and their prime time exploits of recent years. And please check that out as well. Of course, follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. We normally would be joined also by Nick Milanovich, but Nick's having some technical difficulties, so we apologize for that. Nick will join us when he can. But Al, if it's okay with you, we'll get right into our guests.
Please do. Yes, please do.
It's becoming an annual thing now. We bring Ken Kal on before the Red Wing season begins. We have to wait till Ken drags himself away from the boat, of course. once he anchors and then comes in, it's the mainland, and we can talk to him about hockey. And he's here with us tonight, and we appreciate that. How you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm doing fine. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. And, I'm putting the boat away tomorrow. Actually, I'm winter storing it tomorrow. So that officially means hockey season starts for me. And we've got our prospects tournament coming up in Traverse City this weekend, followed the next weekend by training camp. And then we get to our preseason games. And about a month from now, we're starting. We got the regular season opener at home against Pittsburgh. So it's going to be busy, starting at the end of this week.
It's hard to believe. How long have they been doing that prospects tournament, Ken?
I think, Greg and Big Al, I think this is the 25th season of the prospects tournament. I don't know about the future of the prospects tournament. At one particular time, I think we had 8 teams that would compete in the tournament. And now we're just down to Detroit and Dallas. And I think a lot of teams are enjoying just staying home. I think the expense has perhaps maybe a lot to do with it. And maybe they're finding other tournaments. But at one particular time when Ken Holland started this, it was a great opportunity for all the scouts to come in one specific area and watch the prospects from 8 different teams. And, that saves on time and travel for them. And it gives them an opportunity to see some of the youngsters that will eventually play in the National Hockey League.
When you go there to Traverse City and witness that tournament from your perspective, what are you looking for? What gets you going? What gets you interested in it? And what kinds of things are you looking for up in Traverse City?
Well, you see the stars of tomorrow, hopefully, and, not all of them are going to make the National Hockey League, but you see certain players that you just know are going to be future Detroit Red Wings. And, this year I'm going up, and one of the guys that's going to be playing is Nate Danielson. And he was a terrific draft choice by the Red Wings. And last year he actually played in 5 preseason games. I actually thought that maybe he had an opportunity to win a job on the team. That's how good he played. But they decided that they wanted to keep him in junior and get another year of experience. But he played in 5 games last year in the preseason, didn't look out of place. He had 2 goals, 2 assists, 6 shots on goal, a couple penalty minutes, and actually looked pretty good. And as you know, the Red Wings need center iceman, and he is a terrific center iceman. He's going to be a great Red Wing down the road. So a guy like that, the guy that the Red Wings drafted this year, Michael Brandon Nygaard, he's a guy that'll be up at training or prospects tournament. And I wanted to watch him at development camp, and he's just a big, solid, strong guy. Kind of reminds me of Michael Rasmussen when he came in. He's actually, they say that, he likes to shoot from the outside, but he's got a big body. And in the development camp, he was going hard to the front of the net. And so when you have a big body like that, he's only, 18 years old, 207 pounds, and he's only going to get bigger. You want a power forward that's going to go to the front of the net. And he certainly has a good shot. So those are 2 players really that I'm looking forward to coming up to the prospects tournament this year in the next couple of days.
It's hard to believe that it's been 5 months since we were all hanging on the edge of our seats and the Red Wings were trying to get themselves into the playoffs. A lot of white knucklers toward the end of the season. You know that. You broadcasted these very tight, thrilling games. The Red Wings did everything they could to get. I mean, they threw everything at but the kitchen sink to get into the playoffs. And it was, of course, that horrible, weird circumstance with the Flyers pulling their goalie in a tie game. I went out that rehash necessarily, but even though they didn't make the playoffs, that had to have been. I told Keith gave this when I had Keith on the show shortly after that happened. I said, I feel like the last 2 or 3 weeks of that season, I watched playoff hockey, even though it wasn't, because every single game meant so much.
Well, it certainly did, Greg. And when you think about it, the last 3 games of the year, all won by Detroit in overtime, they were going into the third period trailing, and they knew they had to win in order to stay alive for a chance to make the playoffs. And, it was kind of strange because back about a month earlier, as you know, the Red Wings had an 8-point cushion on everybody.
Yeah, right.
And there was even talk that they could finish perhaps maybe third in the division.
Right.
And that was exciting. And then Dylan Larkin gets injured, and a couple other players had some issues. And I think David Perron was suspended. And next thing you know, they lost 7 straight hockey games, and everybody else caught up. But again, you talked about the Flyer situation. You got to handle things yourself. You can't really worry about what other teams do or how if they pull a goaltender or not. You got to take care of business yourself.
Of course.
And I give the Red Wings a lot of credit. They fought hard to the end. And I really thought that was an inspiration, like the dramatic goals that Lucas Raymond scored in that game against Montreal, and David Perron tying it up in Montreal in the final game of the regular season, late in the game. I mean, these are just things that are learning experiences. And when you're a team that hasn't made the playoffs, you need these types of situations to learn from. And obviously, the Red Wings did learn, and you got to learn how to win. And they found ways to win and got it done. Unfortunately, they didn't have the tiebreaker. And even though they tied with 91 points, Washington made it in and not Detroit.
Yeah, we're talking with Ken Kal, radio voice of the Detroit Red Wings here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my gregeno.substack.com and at Greg Eno on Twitter. Big Al Beaton is here. Nick Milanovich has joined us, thankfully, so we'll be getting with Nick in a little bit. But I'm glad you mentioned Raymond because in that horrible stretch of time, Ken, when Larkin went down and no one, unfortunately, really stepped up. That was a very disappointing. If there was one a downer for the year last year was that horrible stretch of hockey when Dylan went down, and you just were waiting for someone to pick things up, and it just didn't happen except for little Lucas Raymond, the young kid. And he, if there was maybe a silver lining in all this, Ken, is that maybe we discovered something about Raymond that we didn't know, that he could be the guy of the future, or at least one of the guys that you can count on, because he really, I hate to say it, he kind of put the Red Wings on his back.
Yeah, he certainly did. You look at Montgomery running in that overtime yesterday, right? He took the team on his back, and you're looking for players like that. And those are the types of players that you win with. And, that was a bright spot. I agree with you, Greg. I like the fact that he took the team on his back and he was putting up numbers and putting up points and doing all the little things that you need to do in order to win. And that's a positive sign. I mentioned Nate Danielson. He kind of reminds me of a guy like that too, where he's just a tiger on the puck. And so I'm excited about some of these younger guys that the Red Wings have. And I know, a lot of people want things to happen right away, but it doesn't happen like that in hockey. It just takes time. And I want this team to make the playoffs in the worst way, but I understand the fact that you got to wait and got to let these guys develop and also get a little bit older, get some games under their belt. But when you find guys like a Sider or a Raymond or maybe even a Danielson down the road, these are guys that are really going to be exciting hockey players in the years to come. And you're going to be glad that they're Red Wings.
We're talking with Ken Kal here on the Knee Jerks. Let's bring Big Al Beaton in. What you got for Ken?
Well, I guess we'll just stay on the topic of the young guys, specifically Raymond and Sider. I guess first off, there's a lot of talk that from the pundits that the Wings really do lack that one superstar level player, the guy that can raise the level of people around him. Is there a chance that maybe Lucas Raymond is that guy, and we finally got to see that at the end of last year?
Well, obviously he's going to be one of the leaders on this team down the road. But again, I think it's a team game first and foremost, and you really need everybody else to contribute. And I think the Red Wings have a pretty good blend right now of veterans and young players on their team. I thought picking up DeBrincat last year was good. He went through stretches where he went south and didn't really do much. But on the other hand, early in the year, he was carrying the Red Wings on his back, scoring big goals and assisting on some goals. So they've got guys, Patrick Kane, signing him and having him healthy to play a whole year. He really surprised me last year. But you're talking young guys. Kane's a little bit on the older side right now, but he's certainly going to help the Red Wings. But it's time right now for some of these youngsters to start developing, and you're going to see that this year. Another year from Sider. Hopefully they can get him and Raymond signed before the start of the season. You've got Edvinson back there on the blue line, who's expected to make this team and be a big role player back there on the blue line. And, up front, like I said, you got Raymond and you've got other guys that are trying to make this team. And let's just hope that, it continues to go in the right direction with some of these guys that they've developed.
Yeah. And just to follow up with you on that, when we were talking about the offense and replacing the offense and getting the goal scoring, there was a lot of talk during free agency that the Wings were making room or shuffling the roster around to make a big splash in free agency, looking for that top six forward, the guy who can put the biscuit in the basket, as they say. Do you believe that the Wings were trying to get a guy and it just didn't work out due to money, length of time, and that sort of thing, like specifically Steven Stamkos?
Well, Steve doesn't invite me into his meetings, so I wish he did.
What
but
do you think?
He holds his cards close to his belt. But if I had to speculate, just reading between the lines, I think the Red Wings thought that they had a guy ready to go. That's why they made room when they traded Wallman out to San Jose. And they wanted some extra money because I think they figured that they had this guy wrapped up, and at the last second, it just didn't work out for Detroit. So you lost the defenseman, you've got some more money, but now on the other hand, you've got to spend some of that money for guys like Raymond and Sider, and it just didn't work out. So it's not like they didn't go after anybody. I think they really had a good shot at getting somebody, a high price free agent. And the guy that I'm thinking about is Stamkos. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but I think he was the guy that they were targeting, and it just so happened that he ended up going to Nashville.
Al mentioned, I want to kind of pick up on what Al was talking about. The Jake Wallman situation was odd. I know that maybe in your capacity, maybe you're not at liberty to share anything you may know about that situation, but did you find that odd? And is there anything you know about that might?
Well, the thing about Jake is when they were in Sweden, and I didn't make it, I was watching the games on TV, but he got injured in one of those games. He hit his head on the side of the post, and he really wasn't the same the rest of the year. Plus, he had some other aches and pains that he was going through, and it was a situation where he just wasn't playing at the level he was playing the year before. I think as far as management was concerned, he was a good player. He was well liked in the locker room, but sometimes, like I said, when you have to make a deal, you gotta find room for players. Then that means players have to go. And again, I don't know. I'm just speculating, and I could be totally wrong, but I think they were trying to get some cap space to sign a big time free agent, and it just didn't work out.
Got it. Well, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
We're talking Red Wings with longtime radio voice Ken Kal here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my gregeno.substack.com and also at Greg Eno on Twitter. You just heard from Big Al Beaton. Let's bring in Nick Milanovich, who's back with us. Technical issues aside, Nick, what you got for Ken Kal?
No, this sounds like we're still having audio issues.
Oh, we still having audio problems. Sorry about that. Well, we'll try to come back to Nick later. Sorry about that. Let's move on. Ken, is it possible that, you mentioned at the top of the discussion, you said that things just don't happen as quickly as you would like them to. And I know that, you're right. And this fan base is, going on, I don't know, 8-9 years now without the playoffs. And I think that they are starting to see, although, and like I said, they did the team did provide the fans with some very exciting hockey in March and April last year. But Al and I have talked about this, and Nick as well, about rebuilds in all sports, not just hockey. And one of the things the theme of everything we talk about when it comes to rebuilds is that they're not linear. And even though the Red Wings have gradually increased their point total, I think they're 4 years in a row, 3 or 4 years in a row now of increasing their point total from the season prior. Is it possible, because things aren't linear, is it possible, and I know I'm asking kind of an ethereal question, but that the Wings could be better as a team, but yet take a step backward, if that makes any sense, because of the competition they have in the East?
Well, there's no guarantee, from one season to the next, whether or not you're going to be better or worse. So you just have to go out there and play. And I think the division that the Red Wings are in is a tough division, and teams that are at the top are in the window right now to win the Stanley Cup, like the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, Toronto Maple Leafs. Those teams aren't going anywhere. They're still going to be very solid teams going into the season, but the teams behind Detroit are getting better too. Teams like Ottawa, Montreal is getting a little better. Buffalo hasn't made the playoffs for a long period of time. They're starting to get better too. So not only you're fighting the top teams in your division, but the teams that you need to beat around you, and that's where it's going to be difficult. And trying to make it up in your division and trying to play better than the teams in the other division too that are in the East. So, yes, I don't know how much the team improved as far as free agency. I think the key going into this season is last year they scored a ton of goals. Their goals against have gotten better over the last couple of years. I think the key right now is maybe if they don't score as much as they did the last year, the effort is on total team defense. And that means the goaltenders have to be good. Your forwards have to come back and be better in the defensive zone. Your defensemen have to be solid, and you got to keep the puck out of the net. And when you can keep the puck out of the net, that's the key, in my opinion, of making the playoffs. Any team you look at that makes the playoffs, their goals against is always lower than their goals scored. So the better you are defensively, the better chance I think you have to win.
Let's talk about that, because the Red Wings signed, of course, Cam Talbot in the offseason, veteran guy, just like last year they signed James Reimer, another veteran guy, to help out in net. Although I think Talbot might be better suited to play more games this year than Reimer was. What about that? I mean, I agree with you. First of all, yeah, of course. You're right. If you were to take all the playoff teams and look at their goals against, it would definitely be on the lower side. But for whatever reason, and I've kind of joked about it on this program, the goaltending situation in Detroit has just been kind of like Dave Dombrowski's bullpen in Detroit. He just never could. Dave could never quite find it was never for a lack of trying. It was never for a lack of signing guys. He just couldn't hit on that one guy it just didn't work. I think about the 2012 and especially the 2013 season with the Tigers, with the grand slam by Ortiz and all sorts of nightmares in the bullpen. For whatever reason, Stevie just hasn't been able to lock that down. And I know it's not easy, believe me. You mentioned it's not easy to do in the NHL. But what about Cam Talbot? You've seen him. You've broadcasted games forever. You've seen this guy forever. What does he bring, do you think, to the club that could be something that could finally help out this goaltending situation in Detroit? Well,
first of all, I think if you look in the system, they've got a couple of goaltenders that I think will be the goaltenders of the future for Detroit. One is Sebastian Cossa, who continues to improve and play better. He had a really good year in Toledo. He's learning as he's playing in Grand Rapids, and maybe next year or the year after, there's a guy that could be your franchise goaltender. Trey Augustine's another goaltender, a fantastic goaltender who who's currently playing at Michigan State University. Every time I see him play, I'm like, wow, this guy's pretty good. And so, maybe they've got some goaltenders now in the system. With that said, you've got to play today. And last year, Ville Husso just couldn't get healthy. I mean, right. The guy was targeted as your number one goaltender, and he missed almost 3/4 of the season just because of the fact that he wasn't healthy. He kept getting injured. But I did think that Lyon and Reimer played really well last year. And I think that's what, if they didn't play well, this team wouldn't have gotten 91 points. I'll tell you that right now. As for Talbot, I think that's an upgrade in goal. I really do. As much as I like Reimer and I like Lyon, This guy's a proven goaltender. He's played in the National Hockey League. He's a veteran netminder, and I think he's got the right attitude to share the net with guys like Husso if he's healthy, or even Lyon. And also, I think they've got Jack Campbell. I think he was a guy that's slated to go to the American League. So if there are any injuries, you've got some veteran goaltenders now that can help you out, whereas before the Red Wings just didn't have it. But again, right now it's hard to piece everything together at one time. You're starting to see the forwards getting a lot better. You're starting to see the defensemen getting better with Seider and Edvinsson coming up this year. The goaltending, as you mentioned, is a work in progress right now. But you've got some veterans right now that have experience that can help this team. So I guess that's the best answer I have. You got to have good goalkeeping if you want to win and you want to make the playoffs. And certainly that's an area where the Red Wings need to be strong at going into the season.
We're talking with radio voice Ken Kal of the Detroit Red Wings here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from mygregeno.substack.com, and of course at Greg Eno on Twitter. Let's bring Big Al back. What you got for Ken Kal?
Yeah, first off, you make a great point about not being able to really put everything together yet. Because as last year, who saw Alex Lyon being the number one goalie for the majority of the year and actually carrying a huge load for them? But speaking of carrying a load, we talked about Raymond and Seider. When do we get concerned about their contract status?
Well, that's a question all the fans are looking at now. And, again, I think before the start of the season, this is just my opinion. Again, I don't sit in on those discussions with Steve, but I think the deals will get done. The problem in today's era, and it's not just our general manager, it's every general manager, the days of the long-term deals are kind of over with now, unless you're a really superstar type player like a Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Leon Draisaitl. Those are very few and far between players. The problem that general managers have now, it's not the money. They'll pay the players. But players want security, they want long-term, and general managers don't want to get stuck in a situation where if the player doesn't produce, if the player somehow gets injured, is not able to play down the road, now you're stuck with that contract, and that's a mess. I mean, it's happened to several players in the National Hockey League over the years, and I think right now general managers, they're willing to pay the players because the money's there with the salary cap. The problem is you don't want to pay them for 7-8 years, so like in a situation with Lucas Raymond or even Mo Seider. Seider's a little bit different, I think, because to me, he's a guy like Nick Lidstrom back there on the blue line. He's one of the guys you're going to build around, right, in the next, 10, 15 years, hopefully. So, he's a little bit of a different story. But Lucas Raymond had one good year. But again, a lot of times players will accept a bridge contract and in the long run, maybe make a lot more money if they do that. But it's the term that general managers are really concerned with right now.
Patrick Kane was another question mark. There was some consternation among the fan base that when Patrick didn't sign or extend or re-sign, whatever you want to call it, with the Red Wings shortly after the season ended, a lot of doomsayers on social media saw that as a sign that he wasn't going to come back at all, that he didn't feel that maybe this was the place for him to be if he wanted to chase the cup one more time, and so on and so forth. And there was, quite a bit of worry about that even though he was saying all the right things and obviously performed very well in Detroit, even though he was one of the guys, again, when Larkin went down, that didn't show up, unfortunately, for about a month. But he was clearly, still a very high productive player, and it looked like that maybe he was going to, test the waters come July 1 and go elsewhere. I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like, Ken, there's still that aura, even though the Red Wings have not made the playoffs in 8 years, there seems to still be that aura around that winged wheel that when push comes to shove, and I think it's probably a testament to the organization as a whole, but there still seems to be that pull, that gravitational pull toward that winged wheel. And once you get here and once you are in the organization and are with the guys and are with the everyone in the organization, there seems to be something really to be said for that.
Well, you're right. And if you look at the training facilities at Little Caesars Arena, that doesn't hurt at all either. I mean, it's second to none, in my opinion, in the National Hockey League. And when you look at the type of surgery and injury that Kane had, and obviously, if you have the facilities to rehabilitate a player, that's a check you can check off too and stay here in Detroit. I was surprised. I'll be honest with you. I was surprised in a couple of ways. One, how quickly he signed. I thought maybe if they were going to sign him, it would be later on after free agency, perhaps. But when he signed real quick, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And then the other thing is, I agree. I thought, well, the Red Wings are still a ways away from winning a Stanley Cup. And if you want to win a Stanley Cup, maybe you go elsewhere, But again, I think he wanted term, and he didn't get it here in Detroit. He obviously signed for just 1 year. But I think Kane really liked it here. He enjoys the community. He enjoys his teammates. He enjoys the environment that Derek Lalonde has and Steve Yzerman instills in the players. And all players, they want structure. And I think he sees that structure here in Detroit. And I'll be honest with you, the type of surgery that he had, a lot of players went through that same surgery and never really made it. I was amazed. He was a point per game player and was just terrific out there on the ice, scored some big goals, and really one of the leaders, veteran leaders on this team. So I'm glad he's back, and he's only going to help out this team in a variety of ways. And one of them is the leadership in the locker room. Now that David Perron is gone, he kind of assumed that leadership with Dylan Larkin. You need somebody else, and Patrick Kane obviously provides that.
We're going to try Nick Milanovich one more time. Nick, we hope you're back. If you got a question for Ken Kal, let's see if you can get it out here.
Can you guys hear me? That's my first question.
Yeah, right.
Oh, God. I'm only 20 miles away from Microsoft's headquarters, and they suck, even out here. You could quote me on it, record it, put it on YouTube. I don't care. Look, I finally get to talk a little hockey. Yeah. It's like, okay. You guys probably covered just about everything. About the two things that really stood out to me, like number one, since we're talking about Patrick Kane, one of the reasons he said he liked being in Detroit actually is because of the Detroit sports media, which was, I usually don't hear that as one of the reasons, but it's like the announcers like yourself, Ken, like he called you guys out because of how much he liked, I guess, how you do the games in his own eyes. So
well, he said he liked Daniel's calls, but he never said anything about me. So for Christmas, I got it prearranged. I'm going to buy him a radio so he can have it.
I gotta say, so I left Michigan 30 years ago, and so it's hard for me to get the broadcasts out here in Seattle. And but I did finally listen to that last game of the season against Montreal, and listening to you on the radio. And I'm going to try and figure out how to get you on the radio over here in Seattle, because I really enjoyed you calling the game. So
well, those are exciting games, and as a broadcaster, those are the games you really enjoy. And again, Ernie Harwell used to say, you could lose 100 games in baseball, but the 101st game could be a no-hitter, and
right.
Anything can happen. And the way the Red Wings finished that season was like they were like playoff games, to be honest with you. Right. And the excitement and the fans that filled the Little Caesars Arena was just amazing. And you just can't help but get pumped up. And so you wish that all the games were like that, but then they wouldn't be special. So those last three games were really special. And it's kind of like all summer long I've been thinking about those last three games and the excitement that we all felt, the fans and myself and Paul Woods in the booth, and talking after the game how fun it was, and how excited we were. And it just sparks that fire again, and you want to get going. And hopefully this year that can be a year they make the playoffs and we can see more exciting plays.
Oh, it's such a different thing to play where every game to the very bitter end of the season is very meaningful. And we got spoiled with the Red Wings being so good for so long. And it felt nice to see that sort of fight in throughout the entire season.
Nick,
hockey.
I was going to say, Nick, you mentioned those games at the end of the year, but I just remember Scotty Bowman telling us it's important to win in October, November, and banking those points away, because you never know what's going to happen during the regular season. I mean, Greg and Big Al were just talking about, when you weren't on the air here, about how the Red Wings had an 8-point cushion And then the next thing you know, they're tied with everybody else because they lost 7 in a row. You never know what's going to happen. So the key with Scotty Bowman's teams were always, let's get off to a good start. Let's try to win as many games as we can, bank the points so we don't have to worry about it in late March and early April.
It's funny you should say that because I would listen to Don Cherry. He has a podcast as well. And he talks about teams when they're out of the playoffs, how well they start playing. And his comment was like, where the hell were you in November? So same philosophy, actually. So
yeah, it's a grind. It's a long grind. And, everybody's got to contribute in their own special way. And I know, Greg, you go back a long time, you too, Big Al, and Nick, you look still young yet, but
only compared to these two.
But like I can remember, I was only 11 years old, 1968, and they had a hero every day, and that's what it takes to win. Usually, it's not just one guy that carries everybody on his back. Maybe he'll do it for a week or two, but everybody's got to contribute in their own special way. And when you can find that chemistry and players doing that, then you have success.
Let's talk a little bit about your.
Greg,
yeah, go ahead.
Follow up real quick on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ken talked about how the season is a grind.
Yeah.
That kind of brought up for you, Ken. It's got to be a grind for you at times too.
Yeah,
And what
sure.
do you do to push through some of those times where you just must be exhausted on a long West Coast trip of weird hours?
Yeah.
How do you push through to make those weird, those dog day games be as important as those late season games?
Good question.
Well, first and foremost, people ask me, what's the hardest part about your job? And I say it's staying healthy, because our job, you just can't call in sick. You know what I mean? I mean, the worst part is being on the road and you come down with a cold or your voice starts going on you. You got to find a way to remedy yourself and until you can get back home, maybe see a doctor and get some medication. But, like those are the tough things. It's staying healthy. And again, every year I pray to God, I say, help me just get through a season where, I can make all 82 games. And unfortunately, last season I had an issue that held me out for a while. I'm feeling good now, which is great. But, like when you're traveling with guys and everybody gets sick and you're on a plane and you just know that if some 2 or 3 or 4 guys get sick, you're in an enclosed environment, sooner or later it's going to hit you. And you just have to make sure that you're eating well, you're hydrating. And sometimes that's hard to do just because of the fact that you're eating late at night. Sometimes if you're not eating the right foods because you get in late somewhere. So that's the toughest part right there. When I say it's a grind, coming back from the West Coast is always tough. My wife and I, we just got back from an Alaska cruise, right? And the next day she couldn't even walk because her time frame was just all out of whack, right? Yeah. So I told her, I laughed. I said, well, we do that 3-4 times a year. I said, we have a game. I said, how would you like to call a game the next day, when you get back after the way you're feeling right now? And that's just the way it goes. And, fans, I guess they don't think about it. They don't understand that. But, if it's bad on the broadcasters, it's even worse on the players. But again, they're in better shape than the broadcasters.
I want to continue to talk. I'm glad Al asked that. That was a good question, by the way. I'm glad Al asked that because I want to continue to talk about your craft, because one of the things I don't think we pay enough attention to when you visit us every year. We don't talk enough to me about your craft. And I wanted to ask you, do you evaluate yourself after these games? Do you and Paul say that was a good broadcast, that wasn't such a good broadcast? Do you critique yourself? Do you listen to yourself? Are you still at this stage of the game, still trying to get better? How do you approach it? Are you competitive with yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's a good question, Greg. And I do it all. I air check myself every game. And, I might not listen to the whole game afterwards, but I will maybe go back to my hotel room and, I'll play part of the game and see if, if there's areas of weakness where I can improve, or am I getting into the point where I'm saying the same things and not describing. Yeah, you have to be your own critic, and you have to continue to work at your craft. And I always use the expression, just because you make it to the major leagues doesn't mean you can stop taking batting practice. You know what I mean? Like you got to continue to work at it. And there's a lot of good announcers out there. You want to make sure that you're at the top of your game, because if you're not, someone can replace you. And you just have to I think that's what separates the people from the top from the bottom is how hard you work at your craft. And, Paul and I, we don't really talk about like, yeah, that was a good game or no, he does his own thing. I do mine, but I can tell you, Greg, that I evaluate myself almost every game, and I try to get better and better each and every time. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes I know I had a bad broadcast. The fans might not know it, but I do, and then there are games when you go like, man, I was on the top of my game. I was hitting the players right. I made sure I made the right calls and I knew the players and so but maybe the average fan doesn't, but as a broadcaster, you do.
The thing that I've always admired about hockey announcers like yourself is that unlike basketball, baseball, and football, those sports all have set times where there's going to be action. That there's going to be action in a football game, then there's going to be a pause where the teams go back to the huddle and so forth. In baseball, there's going to be action. Well, you don't know necessarily when the ball's going to be put in play, but there's going to be time between pitches to kind of catch your breath and so on. In basketball, there's going to be times where there's a timeout or there's a foul called, and you can, again, kind of reset. In hockey, the thing that I've always been fascinated about in your craft is that you don't know going into any game when that puck gets dropped, Ken, you have no idea if you're going to be calling 2.5 minutes straight, or if you're going to be calling 15 seconds, if you're going to be calling a bunch of choppy 20-second increments because the puck keeps getting knocked out into the stands, or there's a lot of face-offs. Or again, like I said, you could go 3 minutes without a face-off. You don't know that. You have no idea what's going to happen. And I've always admired that about hockey announcers because they go into each game. You can prep, which I know you do, and you do your homework. But once that puck gets dropped, you don't know what you're in for.
No, and you don't. And there was a game, I think it was late in the season. I forgot who we were playing, but the first 11 minutes of the game, I think there were 2 whistles. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so we had 3 spot breaks every period. Mm-hmm. And we were way behind on the spot breaks. But you're right, and that's where Paul's good. Like I can always rely on him. Where we're not always talking. If I need a break, I'll give him a little tap, and then he'll take care of it, and then I'll go in. We've got a pretty good chemistry going with each other, so that really helps out a lot. But yeah, you never know. And to me, the best games are the ones that flow the best. I enjoy calling 11 minutes straight, just because when games get choppy, you just can't get into a rhythm. You can't get into a flow in your call. And the more that there's continuous flow, and trust me, that's the beauty of the sport. No other sport you can change that I can think of. You can change while the game's going on, and hockey's one of those sports. And that's the beauty of the game. It's the continuous flow and the up and down action and the great shots, the great saves. And, there's excitement on one end of the ice, and then there's excitement on the other end of the ice. And just things are happening at a great clip. And to me, I was fortunate to call a couple Tiger games. And I'm really impressed what Dan Dickerson does, because I tried to do it, and you don't realize how hard it is until you try to do it. And he makes the game sound so good. And to me, it's easier to call an action than it is to try and fill. And Dan has so much material that, like Ernie Harwell had, that he just makes it sound flawless. So to me, I'd rather call hockey. The only other thing, Greg and Big Al and Nick, is we don't have the most ideal locations to call the game from. And that makes it difficult too. There are some arenas like Dallas and Edmonton. Edmonton's got a beautiful arena, but where we're at calling the game, the players look like ants. And it's hard. You really have to be on your game to really identify players. I guess on radio, it doesn't matter sometimes because nobody's really seeing it. Right. But you as a professional want to be on the call, and you want to be at your best. And sometimes it's really hard to identify those players when they're so small.
As we wrap things up, let's give everybody another shot at Ken Kal. Let's go to Nick. What you got?
Let me know if you guys covered this already, but one of the things I noticed from this past season, actually, it was like Dylan Larkin. I always thought of him as a leader on the team ever since he's pretty much been on the team. But for some reason this year, it seems like even he was able to noticeably kick it up a notch from like even previous seasons. Is that kind of like, have you been able to notice a difference in him, like really like stepping up his game basically?
Well, I've always said that if you look at your most valuable players, how you determine if they're most valuable is when they're out of the lineup and how your team plays without them in the lineup. And we saw that happen with Dylan Larkin. And I don't know what it is about Dylan, but he seems to fire up people around him. When he's out there buzzing around and playing his game, everybody else is jumping too. When he's not in the lineup, there's a considerable change for whatever reason it is. And maybe it's the energy that he provides, or, how good of a skater he is. And, he can make players better around him with the way he plays the game. So I agree with you, Nick. I think he's a guy that needed to step up his game. He has stepped up his game, but now we're looking at other players too. Alex DeBrinket's another guy, right? I mean, that guy, he went through stretches last year where he wanted to play better. Points weren't on the table. He wasn't getting his points, but he's got to be a little more consistent, just like everybody else. Everybody else has to pick it up too. And for this team to make it to the playoffs, they're not blessed with a superstar caliber player like a Leon Draisaitl or a McDavid or a Austin Matthews. They've got a lot of good players, but they all have to play. They can't take nights off. They can't rely on one player carrying the load when nobody else is going. Everybody's got to be working together as a team.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring things down here, Ken, but I know that the hockey family in the entire National Hockey League is a family. And whether it's your broadcaster, a player, a coach, a GM, you name it. And I just was so saddened to hear about Johnny Gaudreau. And that was just so incredibly sad. And I'm just wondering, how does that impact? I know he's not on the Red Wings, and I know that he's never played for the Red Wings, but, you've covered him. You've broadcast games, and I'm sure you've met him. And I wonder, how does something like that, which was so horribly sad, how does something like that impact the league? Is that something that's felt around the league? I know it happened in the offseason, but is it something that is felt around the league? Do you feel it as an announcer for the Red Wings? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Well, Greg, when I first heard about it, I was out in Alaska, and I'm thinking to myself, this could happen to anybody.
Right.
You never know when your time is up. I mean, you, me, anybody could be riding your bike, and next thing you know, somebody runs you over, or, a safe falls on your head or something. I don't know. Strange things happen, right?
Right.
But it really makes you think a little bit about, enjoying life right now and doing the things that you like to do. And if you feel like complaining, just think about what happened here. It's not worth it at all, So I guess the best thing is you just have to enjoy each and every moment of your life and try not to think about what could happen. But we're all vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. Everything can happen. And Johnny Gaudreau was an excellent hockey player, and he was very talented. I really enjoyed the way he skated and moved out on the ice. I think him and Dylan, they played together in certain tournaments. I remember we played a game in Calgary. It was either last year or the year before, and it was one of the linesmen's last games. And so everybody at the end of the game went to shake the hand of the linesman, and Gaudreau was behind Larkin, and Gaudreau was messing around with Dylan's behind with his stick. And so Dylan just grabbed his stick, pulled it away from him. And, they both got a chuckle out of it. But, that's the camaraderie. You compete hard against each other.
Right.
But in the end, they're all competitive, but they're all in for each other as well. And they don't want to hurt each other, but they'll do anything they can to win. So the thing is, yeah, I think about it. I think about, how vulnerable we all are, and you just got to enjoy every day.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty much all you can do. Let's we're going to wrap things up here. Let's give Big Al though one more shot at Ken Kal. What you got?
Yep.
All right, well, that's after you're talking about Johnny Hockey, I don't want to. Well, I'll just put it this way, Ken. Should we expect a possible step back record-wise next year with the expected influx of young players? Bringing up a few guys for some reason I wanted to say Adirondack, but I should say Grand Rapids. I'm showing my age there.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, right.
And,
I remember that too, so I'm old too.
Yeah. But it's been a steady climb in the points every year under Steve Yzerman. But rebuilds don't tend to be linear. Is it possible with the influence of young players, the Wings may take a while to find their footing?
Well, again, I thought they lost some key players, some leaders like David Perron. He was well liked in the locker room. But on the other hand, Kane came back. We talked about that a little bit. I think up front, they got some scoring power now with Vladimir Tarasenko. I think he's in the prime of his career right now, and he's going to help out on the power play. And really, when you think about it, the Red Wings are pretty deep up front right now, especially down the middle with Larkin, Comfort, Kopp, even Veleno. I mean, they're not the strongest down the middle in the National Hockey League, but they're way better right now than they were maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. And then on the wings, you've got, DeBrink, as we mentioned, Tarasenko will be there, Raymond, Michael Rasmussen, who continues to play better, very effective penalty killer, defensive player. Kopp, he's a good two-way player as well. Berggren, he had a really good year in Grand Rapids. I wanted to say Adirondack, but Grand Rapids. And, the jury's out on him too, but, he's at that point where he wants to earn a position with a team in the National Hockey League, and hopefully he can come in and play really well. And back on the blue line, you got some veteran leadership now too with Gustafsson, who isn't a fancy hockey player, but he's a guy that's pretty like a stay-at-home defenseman, and he's not going to give up a lot of chances, and you need those types of players too. So I don't know. I think it's going to be tough again. Last year, I predicted that the Red Wings would be in the hunt. I didn't think that they would make the playoffs, and they didn't, but they should have. This year, I think they're in the same boat. I think they're going to be right there in the end, and if things go their way, they'll make the playoffs.
All right.
Before we let you go, Ken, let us know, are you guys broadcasting on the radio any exhibition games this year?
Yeah, we're doing all the home games. I think the first home game against Chicago is going to be on WWJ because the Tigers are on 97.1. And then the rest of the games, the home games, will be on 97.1, the ticket. And then starting the regular season, obviously, every game, home and away, we'll be broadcasting. So it'll be good to, get back into the swing of things. I talked to Paul Woods today. He's excited about joining us again in the broadcast booth. And I'll tell you what, he doesn't get a lot of recognition here in Detroit.
Yeah,
he's one of the longest analysts in the job in any sport here in Detroit. I don't know. He's been here 38, 39 years, something like that. But I want to tell you, the guy is a walking encyclopedia. And, I always say I'm the guy that goes into the test and I forget the answers when I walk out the door, but he remembers everything, and he can tell you right now who the top 4 centers are on the Kings or on the Ducks, and he can tell you all that stuff. So I really rely on him a lot. And he's taught me a lot about, hockey. I never played the game. I played a little bit, but not at his level. And just to be able to, spend time with him, whether it's on the bus, on the airplane, or in the booth before the game, after the game, just to talk hockey with him. I've learned a lot over the years from him.
Well, I tell you what, for those who don't know or too young to know, Paul Woods was one of the best penalty killers I've ever seen, ever. I mean, he was an amazing penalty killer. He was originally, as you know, in the Canadiens organization. The Red Wings got him from Montreal, and for whatever reason, the Canadiens were a powerhouse back then. He couldn't crack a Canadiens lineup, but Paul was an outstanding penalty killer, and he really warmed himself up to the fans as a player, and fans don't remember. A lot of people don't remember that, but Paul was a fan favorite as a player. But you're absolutely right that as a broadcaster, maybe he gets overshadowed by Mickey Redmond. Maybe there's the whole television bias there because Mickey's been around forever too. And maybe that's part of it. But you're right. Paul has been around for a long time, and he does know a lot about hockey. There's no question about that. Well, Kenny, thanks for being here. Fire up those pipes. We're ready to hear you about a month from now. And we wish you another healthy, more than anything, a healthy season for you personally and, of course, for the Red Wings. And we'll look forward to it. And thank you for doing this, my friend. We always appreciate it.
All right, let's check in maybe halfway through the season, and we'll get an update on how the team's playing. And hopefully, they'll be in first place in their division.
Right.
Exactly.
Hey, sounds good to me.
Yep.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Have a good night.
Right.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
And that, everybody, was Ken Kal, who is always a joy to talk to, guys. Always a joy to talk to.
I think that guys like Kenny is I think one of the reasons these kinds of guests like to come on our program is they don't get a chance to talk like this. They're broadcast in his case, they're broadcasters, and they do one thing throughout the course of the year, and they may do an occasional interview. Of course, they may when they're the interviewer, where they're asking the questions. but nobody gives them a chance to talk like we give them a chance to talk. And I think that's one of the reasons why they enjoy these kinds of guys, getting like the Keith Gaves of the world and people like that we've had on.
Mm-hmm.
They enjoy coming on this program because nobody gives them a chance to really, they don't do this anywhere else. Chris Creighton, our friend, coach at EMU, he doesn't sit down with anybody for 45 minutes like he talks, with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but I think that's one of the reasons why these kind of guests genuinely enjoy when they say it's good to be here. I think they genuinely mean it.
Yeah, exactly. It's always just nice to also as kind of delve into what their jobs are like rather than just talk about the Red Wings or whatever, or the team they're whatever their team they're involved with. Like I said with Coach Creighton, get into his into things that involve. There's so much involved with running a college program, for example, with him or with Ken, trying to stay healthy through a season when we all know how hard it is, especially as much as those guys fly. Oh my! Yes. I can't believe Ken doesn't get sicker.
Right.
It's that sort of thing. But all right, with that, guys, I think it's time to let's kind of get the podcast started. Now we have our special guest out taken care of. So no, we didn't get to do Greg. We didn't get to introduce Nick since he was having. Also joining us on the podcast this week is the new guy. I guess
the new guy.
The new guy. And that would be Nick Milanovich. Nick, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. Like I said, it's been about 6 weeks.
Yeah, there's
going on in everybody's life, so we had to take some time off.
Oh, for sure. And it was I was among those that really needed that time. Yeah. Up until a few days ago, I spent the last 2 weeks in a trailer on the Washington coast, which if you would let me, I'd still be there. And I guess I was happy.
You're selling that short. You showed us pictures. That wasn't a trailer.
Pictures.
That was a hotel suite you were staying in, not a trailer.
Okay, technically it was a trailer, but it was big. It was definitely big. So, and I was like about 5 minutes from the ocean, and I could drive up onto the beach and just plunk my chair down and just wait for the sun to go down, which is exactly what I did.
Nice. Nice.
So I didn't watch any tigers in that time.
Yeah, you can't beat being by the water. You just can't.
Not at all.
Greg spent a lot of time doing that himself in August as well. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we all had a very eventful August, to say the very least. So I think we all needed to take some time away from sports as well, because we all got into our personal life bubble and really weren't able to, just get. I wasn't spending every night watching sports. I'll just put it that way. I wasn't watching the Tigers every night, or following as closely. But we're getting to that time where we kind of have to, because there's a lot going on right now. So before we start talking Detroit Lions and Little Tigers, Greg, I think it's time for the birthday game.
It is time for the birthday game. Let's do it. It's been so long, I forget how we even do this. So we're gonna play.
Don't worry about it. I'll edit in the music.
No, I know you will. But let's play a game we like to call "Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?"
There we go.
Everybody knows how we play this game by now, except me, apparently. I give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports, and if these gentlemen can guess this person within the first two clues, they'll receive, in this case, this time, a Stretch Armstrong doll.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's
it. Replace the one I broke when I was a kid.
I'll put him next to my G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip.
Kung Fu grip.
And the fuzzy hair, the real hair.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
This person, guys, made his name in football. He was born in this state in 1949. He played college football at Notre Dame. I will tell you that. He was a quarterback. And he was a longtime quarterback in the NFL, but also made his name after his career talking into a microphone.
Let's see. Joe Theismann?
Joe Theismann. Yep. Very good. Very good. Joe Theismann. 75 today.
Yep. Who had one of the most horrific injuries ever saw on live television.
Oof.
No kidding.
I still cringe after seeing that.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, that was bad.
Yes.
So Joe is
right. Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's in a lot of ways, I think he was more well known for his broadcast career than his football career.
Yeah, it's funny because he wasn't. It's funny about Theismann. He wasn't a great quarterback to me.
I remember him returning punts for
yeah, and he was a punter, and he played, of course, at Notre Dame, like I said, and
yeah.
he was. He played in Canada for his first 3 years actually, but he was. I don't know. I wasn't sold on him as a great quarterback because he had Riggins, he had a great offensive line. I wouldn't put him with Bradshaw or Montana or any of those guys, but he was a winner. I mean, he did win a lot of football games. He was, and he, I don't know that frankly if they could have won all those games without Theismann because they didn't really have much of a backup quarterback. I just never thought of Theismann as a great quarterback for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He would be who would we compare him to today? A journeyman. Not a journeyman, but not a star. Maybe that'd be the best way to put it. You know?
Yeah, he was
maybe like a Ryan Tannehill or something.
Or maybe even like a Phil Simms type, maybe even. I don't know.
Phil Simms was better, though, I think.
Jared Goff.
But yeah, we're going off on a tangent here.
It could be like Jared Goff, though. So that's the way they talk about golf all the time.
Yes. Yeah, next show we'll have a segment on how good was Joe Theismann. So, but, anyway. All right, but I will be expecting the Stretch Armstrong via FedEx, not UPS. All right, so okay. Anyway, all right. There's been a lot going on over the past few weeks since we've been essentially off the air. Specifically, the Tigers are actually in the sort of in a playoff hunt. They're only 3.5 games out of the final wild card, and they're actually the way they're playing, they could make things interesting over the final month of the season. But I think what's kind of taken over everything when it comes to Detroit sports is the Lions started the regular season Sunday night, national television, a playoff rematch against Matthew Stafford and the Rams, and the Lions won 26-20 in overtime. But before we kind of get into that, guys, we're, as longtime Detroit sports fans, this is maybe the weirdest I've ever felt going into a season as a fan of the Lions, and that they were receiving serious Super Bowl hype. I mean, there's a lot of people picking them to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. Significant national media attention. They're at the top of the power rankings. They're being mentioned during pregame and postgame shows. There's a ton of nationally televised and primetime games. I think they have like 8 of them or something like that this year. It wasn't that long ago, guys. Every Lions game started at 1 o'clock. You could set your calendar to the entire season. The Lions would play at 1 o'clock on Sunday, 12:30 on Thanksgiving, and the only time that changed that season was that final game against Green Bay, where that was kind of like the game that kind of proved to everybody that things are changing in Detroit. So, I don't know about you guys, but it really feels like we are in uncharted territory as a fan base. And I don't know about you, Nick and Greg, but it really feels like sometimes the fan base doesn't know how to. I don't want to say doesn't know how to act, but they're still kind of struggle with that history, long history of this team always somehow in the end screwing it up. Like the game Sunday. I think for decades the Lions lose that game, and we're talking about moral victories and that kind of bullshit. Yep. So, but they didn't. They didn't play well, but they beat a legitimate playoff team with probably run by a Hall of Fame quarterback who played a great game, and the Lions won. So I don't know about you, Greg, but I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it hasn't dropped for like 2 years now.
Yeah, I wrote about that today, actually, about the primetime thing, what you're talking about, but the Sunday games at 1 o'clock. I kind of jokingly said that those Sunday 1 o'clock games are becoming extinct anymore when it comes to the Lions. But I think they play 9 of their 17 games in prime time, and I consider prime time even that late game at 4:25, where it's the 4:30 window, right. Yeah. They've got, I think, 9 of those games versus 8 that are just the regular 1 o'clock Sunday games. I don't think I'm kind of beyond that shoe dropping thing. I mean, I think I think it's evident to me that this is an elite football team. I mean, it just is. They're and I think one of the reasons why is because of what you just said is that they did not play their best. The offense clearly looked rusty because they didn't play together in preseason, which was by design, of course. It was, determined that they were going to do that. But yeah, they looked plodding at times. St. Brown and Laporta were kind of missing in action there for a while. Goff was a little bit off, just a smidgen off. Jamison Williams was really the only receiver that was doing anything. The running game was okay. They were getting killed in time of possession, just absolutely killed. But they found a way to win, and they've been doing that. I mean, that's the thing, Al, is the last couple of years, and you can go all the way back to that 8-2 finish of 2022, and then all last year, and now last night, they're finding ways to win as opposed to lose, and they win a lot of games where they're coming from behind. We were talking to Ken Kal about the Red Wings coming from behind in the last week of the season there a lot, and had pull games out in the third period. The Lions have been doing that in the fourth quarter, and in this case overtime. But the key though is what you said. They didn't play their best, and they still won. And to me, and Dan Campbell said it too to his team in the locker room. He said, we didn't, that's the mark of a good team. And he's right. When you don't play your best against a good team and still come out on top, why? Because in overtime, they just ran the ball right down the Rams' throats. And I think that was the thing that was impressive about that is the Rams' defense was the one that was the most rested. The Lions were being killed, like I said, in time. I don't know what the time of possession was after 60 minutes, but I bet you it was 35-25 for sure. Mm-hmm. And every bit of 35-25. And yet the Lions in overtime, the Rams looked like the tired defense on the field, not the Lions. The Lions ran the ball right down their throat, all Montgomery, and the Rams had no answer. And I think it's because that offensive line, that's what's so important about having a great offensive line, they just mauled them when they had to. And the Rams had no answer for Montgomery, no answer for the offensive line, and they're absolutely helpless in overtime. And, again, I think they deserve every bit of praise that they get, every bit of Super Bowl talk that they get. Because if you look around the NFC, who's better? Who's better? How many teams are better than they are?
Right. Right now, it would really be in the NFC. You could argue that maybe because the Niners didn't have a very good offseason. They had their major issues. Meanwhile, the Lions offseason for the most part was smooth sailing. They got the contract signed that they needed to get signed. They had apparently a very good draft, and it was very drama free compared to a lot of teams. Nick, you tend to be the biggest cynic out of the three of us. No doubt. He's also the youngest, so that probably plays into it. But are you starting to drop your much like I was thinking about that? Maybe I hate to use the term PTSD when it comes to Lions, but that's kind of what it feels like.
I was wondering about this. When is the shoe going to drop? Mm-hmm. I still get that a little bit. I still wonder just because of so many years of that kind of thing happening.
Right.
If I think about yesterday's game, they didn't play the greatest, but they have something that they haven't had in a long time. And if this team is good, they're probably going to have a chip on their shoulder because the end of last season and that last playoff game against the Niners probably really pissed them off and put a bad taste in their mouth. Mm-hmm. And a good team is going to remember that and get better and be even more focused in the next season, which, started this past week. And, but, Greg was saying this, a sign of a good team is that they can win even if they're not at their best, even if they give up a lead. They gave up a lead late in the game to Stafford and the Rams. Mm-hmm. Did that matter? No, they went for it. They have a kicker now, seemingly. So they went in, they tied the game, and then you're thinking like, oh crap, what's going to happen in overtime? This is especially with the strange NFL overtimes.
Yep.
But they just dominated in that overtime. Like I had never seen a Lions team that sort of confidently just plowing into another team like that. And I said it last year, David Montgomery's a cannonball because he does not want to go down ever.
Yep.
So, that's the kind of sort of edge and attitude you need. And I honestly have never seen that in the Lions before. So,
yeah, it was, right when Jared Goff won the coin toss and they cut to a close-up of Dan Campbell, and he had this huge smile on his face, like he knew what was coming. Is that we're just going to ram this ball down this team's throat. And when you're able to impose your will on a team like that, I mean, that is pure undistilled football right there. Doing what the Lions did on that drive, where it said we're just gonna hand the ball off to our biggest running back. He's gonna go between the tackles, and you can't stop him. And they couldn't. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure I was not the only Lions fan going, run the ball, and feed Monty, because it was hilarious that, he averaged he was averaging 9 yards a carry on that drive.
Right.
I mean, you can't that, and people are like, why couldn't they do a whole game? Well, they set it up that way because it's great how the Lions have this 1A, 1B running back attack, because that leaves someone fresh at the end of a game. And in this game, it was Montgomery. Because as good as Gibbs is, and he's a very, very good running back, he can't do what Montgomery did on that drive, Greg, and that is essentially move the pile. And he was, it was like watching 70s Big Ten football. It really was.
Well, how many times, Al, and Nick knows this too. I mean, he's seen this too. How many times have we seen bad Lions teams get the football with the lead, with about 4 or 5 minutes to go, and not be able to close the game out? They never could close the game out. If they won games in those days, in the Matthew Stafford days, it was never with Matt taking a knee. Never. It was always with the defense holding on for dear life and trying to get a stop. And sometimes they would, and they'd win the game on defense because they'd get a 4th down stop or something. But rarely were the Lions ever going into victory formation. Very rarely, because they never had the football. They would get the football 4 or 5 minutes left and not be able to close out the game. They didn't have that grinded out running attack, like you said, Al, that they have now. Yeah. They didn't have the offensive line that they do now. And they couldn't exert their will over teams, and they wouldn't be able to do what they did in overtime last night. They just wouldn't. They couldn't. And so they would always pump the football back with 2.5 minutes to go to the likes of Aaron Rodgers or you name it. It could even be a sub-scrub guy from some backup from the Carolina Panthers. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. And the Lions everybody would be just gripping their seat, hoping they could hang on while this quarterback would march right down the field on them. It happened all the time, and more often than not, the Lions lost those games. They could not finish games. And this club finishes games. They do. It started in Green Bay on that last game of the 2022 season when they knocked the Packers out of the playoffs, and it hasn't stopped since. They've got an identity. That's another thing, Al, you and I have talked about. What's their identity? Well, they have an identity now. It's not just going for it on 4th down. That's not their identity. Their identity that's not their identity. That's Dan Campbell's, what he's known for. But their identity is exactly what they did to the Rams in overtime. That's exactly what their identity is.
Yeah, and Nick, watching the end of that game last night, I was just kind of going off what Greg was talking about. I was terrified that they were going to leave too much time on the clock and give Stafford a chance to get them close enough for a game-winning field goal. I mean, how many times have we seen Stafford do that? But the one thing I couldn't figure out was Sean McVay deciding not to call timeouts, which I kind of found very. It was like he kept. I don't know if McVay was waiting for Dan Campbell to call a timeout, or
are you talking about overtime or regulation?
No, but going
at the end of regulation, right?
Oh,
okay. Regulation.
No, I see. Yeah.
He just let the clock run. I'm like, awesome.
Right.
I don't know about you, Nick. I was like scratching my head at some of as good as a coach McVay is. sometimes his clock management had me scratching my head last night.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, nobody called timeout at all, and I was wondering if like McVay just wanted the time to run out anyway and let the Lions maybe sort of hang themselves at the end, mismanage the clock. And then at some point when the Rams did get the ball back, it could be disastrous. Matt Stafford could like be gunslinging and throw for a bomb and a touchdown, or he could throw an interception and a pick six. So, because he was on the 30, I think, at the end of the game. I think that's where they started.
Right.
So, and maybe he was also willing to take his chances in overtime too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, to kind of follow up on that, Nick, Stafford did play one hell of a game last night. I mean, the Lions put immense pressure on him, and my God, he was making some unbelievable throws. He was making, he had a no-look pass for a first down. He made some crazy-ass throws with that arm of his. But much like his Lions days, he looked great, and they still lost. And I don't know if that was fitting when it comes to Matthew Stafford, but I think that because look at their offensive line, Rams' offensive line was down to like their second or third string tackles. They lost Puka Nacua, who actually went on the IR today during the middle of the game. Yeah, that game was all Matt Stafford to keep the Rams in that game and actually had them in a position to win the game. And my God, it was just like his Lions days, where he looked great, kept the game in a position where they could do something, but he didn't get the win in the end.
Well, you could argue too that he had to do all those acrobatics because he had no choice.
Right.
And they were getting outmatched. He just happens to have had several years as a Lions quarterback practicing that kind of that kind of circus act. And but as it was with the Lions times, it didn't get him very far in the end. So, he did well, and he's always going to do well because he's an excellent quarterback. But, it turns out he was, having to scramble, where I think we were kind of talking about this before. So, if it was kind of along the lines of something Ken was saying earlier in hockey. You have the one superstar, if that guy isn't having a good game, somebody else has to pick up the slack. And so in this case, was anybody else picking up the slack? Maybe, maybe not. Although his receivers did have a good game. I think there was that one reception. Gosh, what's the receiver's name? Johnson?
Yeah,
he just broke a bunch of tackles. Yeah, exactly.
It looked like the Lions over pursued and that weird footing last night. Lions were slipping all over the damn place for whatever reason. But yeah, that was the one play that I found frustrating. That was the game. That was a play that should have went for 10 yards. It went for 60. But that happens in the NFL. I'm sure Rams fans are saying, how could they let JMO run 20 yards down, open downfield? That kind of stuff happens in the NFL. You're right.
Yeah. So.
But Greg, since Nick's talking about superstars, Greg, Aiden Hutchinson last night, he was an unstoppable force. But and people say, well, yeah, because he's going against the second string tackle. He did exactly what he should against the second string tackle. He couldn't stop him at all. I mean, I made a point to watch Hutchinson in a couple of plays, and he has got so many moves on the pass rush. It's crazy. Spin moves, swim moves, bull rushing. That he is, you could make a case, I think, Greg, that Aiden Hutchinson is going to be in the talk for Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL.
I think so. The thing about him is that he's a really good example of a guy who's, you don't just look at his stat sheet and determine how well he played.
But Greg, he only had one sack.
Yeah, right. But last year, I was looking this up earlier today. Last year, he had 33 quarterback hits in 17 games, which is about 2 a game. He had 4 quarterback hits yesterday, 4 in one game alone. He doesn't. If he doesn't get a sack, he's almost getting a sack, and there's a lot to be said for almost getting a sack because you're You're pressuring the quarterback. You're making him a little more uncomfortable. You know, he does things that football coaches and people who know football, they appreciate. Yeah, the average fan may only look at a sack total and say, okay, he got 11 and a half sacks last year. That's okay. It's pretty good. But could he get more? Blah, blah. It's not just that. He's always in the vicinity of the quarterback. And, you know, you mentioned the moves he has and so forth. And he's just a complete, he's really, he's better than I thought he was going to be coming out of Michigan. I knew he was good. There's no question about that. I knew he was worthy of the number 2 overall pick. I agreed with that. But I really didn't think he was going to be this good this fast. And the thing about him that's got to scare a lot of people in the NFC or the Lions' opponents in general is that he's got some help now. He's got some help on the defensive line. He's got other people now who can create havoc as well. Davenport's one of them. Yeah. And that, you know, and then of course Houston and if, you know, guys like that. And
DJ Reader's going to play next week.
Reader's coming back, and I just feel like he's got more help now that he can be even better, and those sack totals can go up, but he is very difficult to contend with. And you're right. Yeah, he worked a lot against that poor number 61 all night. But he, like you said, he did what he had to do against a guy like that. I mean, it would have been disappointing. How disappointed would we all have been if we're sitting here today saying, geez, he was going up against a backup tackle and couldn't do crap. Yeah. Well, he did exactly what he needed to do. You know, he did have the one roughing the passer, which was legit. That was a good call for sure. Mm-hmm. And he can get those on occasion, but I don't think he's a dirty player. I think that's just the way he plays. He's just he's got a high motor. And with Aaron Donald retired and so forth, yeah, I think he has a great chance. I know there's still guys like Bosa around, but I think he's got a great chance to be Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. And what's funny, also kept, as I'm watching Hutchinson, and all I kept thinking out there for a while was, remember Wayne Fonts desperately wanted that defensive end, and he would call, I want the defensive end that can block out the sun, so to speak, and he could never, ever really get that guy. And it's taken a while, but, you know, for the last pass rusher who was that dominant was probably had to go back to Bubba Baker. And we're talking, God, at this point, 40 years? When he had his best years, it was the late, like 1980, 81, especially when he had that 20-plus sack year when sacks weren't really counted yet. But, you know, yeah, exactly. Hutchinson did what he was supposed to do in that game, and that was wreak havoc when there's someone, a less talented player in front of him. Speaking of wreaking havoc, Nick, we got to talk about James Williams. The Lions coaches and media, for that matter, were talking up J-Mo all through training camp. They're saying he looks like a different player. He looks more focused. He's making plays. He's bigger. He's actually had his first full training camp as a pro, and he kind of had a coming out party last night. 5 catches, 121 yards, 1 touchdown, the 52-yard bomb, 134 total yards. He had a 13-yard end around. Do you think this was the coming out party for James and Williams?
Considering his first year, he was injured for just about all of it. Yep. And I mean, he came out of college with an injury. And then last year, that stupid betting thing that went on. Yep. So that kind of slowed things down a lot too. And it was a distraction probably. Yep. So I'm not surprised with no injuries and no other kind of like distractions. He's focused. He's on a team that's also very focused too. So I think that makes a big difference as well, because everybody else is like that around him. So I'm not surprised he's doing well starting this year. And I got to say, I love watching him play. That dude is fast. Mm-hmm. He is really fast. So yeah, I mean, hopefully he stays healthy and plays all season long because he's a hell of a player.
And I think the other thing about him is just how emotional he is on the field, and that tends to get everybody else around him going. And he did like 3 separate celebrations after that touchdown last night, and if you saw the end of the game replay when Montgomery scored that touchdown, and J-Mo was literally in the face of a defensive back. talking trash at the end of the game. And it was even funnier than in the post game. He came up and said, "I've never done this before." Where he'd been talking to the media like this, and he goes, "What got me?" He said he never got a game ball before. And he had the Sunday night football game ball that actually Goff gave him, and he really is in a lot of ways kind of a refreshing breath of fresh air compared to your typical diva wide receiver. If you know what the comparison I'm making.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see kind of the interview afterwards, but honestly, that's kind of what I see with all of the Lions players. They're tough, they play well, but I don't know if I can name a diva on that team at all.
Right.
None of them whatsoever. They do have an edge to them, though. They're pretty confident in themselves. I mean, the guy what's his name? Arnold, I think, is the guy they picked first round this year.
Yeah.
Terry and Arnold, yeah.
Yeah, he's got some attitude too, but it's not just kind of like being a diva either. So that's kind of I guess another thing different with this team is this is a confident group of players, just all around, and JMO as well. So it's refreshing to see, and then not doing stupid things too.
Yeah.
Or getting cocky or fine, you're doing a touchdown celebration, big deal, but like kind of getting ridiculous after games and acting all weird and stuff. So nothing like Tyreek Hill or anything. So
yeah. Oh yeah. But Greg, do you see this team doing another one bites the dust?
No. I think the most we're going to get is a Dan Campbell Applesby commercial.
Yes, but actually, he looks like he's a pretty damn good actor, to be honest.
Yeah. But I think it's just Campbell being Campbell. I don't know. I don't think he's acting at all. I think that's just Campbell being Campbell.
Yeah. And what's funny, that again goes to the attention this team is getting. I mean,
right.
I saw Amon-Ra St. Brown is in a national commercial with George Kittle for Little Caesars. You got Dan Campbell for Applebee's. You're seeing the Lions pop up on promotional videos for the NFL and teams that are doing promotions with them, that they are using the Lions logo or a caricature of a lion and things like that. That's stuff we've never ever seen with this franchise, and honestly, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's as old Lions fans, I'm like not sure what we're supposed to do with this. It's so foreign to us.
My hands, I don't know.
I'll take this problem over the one we've suffered the last, how many decades?
Yes. Yeah, well, it's I've been a fan for I was since 1970, and this is the most fun I've had as a Lions fan ever. No, as cool as the '91 season was, and as I'm sure Greg remembers, that team. You really didn't feel that team had the staying power. Every time the Lions had a great team that could have done something, the '70 Lions, '91 Lions, probably the 2014 Lions. Those are probably the three best teams in Greg and I's lifetime. And none of those teams felt like they had the staying power that this one does, Greg.
Well, you guys were talking about this earlier. It's like, the Lions somehow at the very end of games always you kind of had a feeling they're going to lose it somehow.
Yeah.
You didn't know exactly which way they were going to do it. Dumb penalty or whatever it might be, but you just never felt even in their good seasons where they make the playoffs. You just never felt like almost like they got there by accident and shouldn't be there. And it's just going to be one and done every year. Last year was the first year like I didn't feel that. And then even this year, I don't necessarily feel like they're going to be that same old Lion sort of kind of feeling. You feel like they know what they're actually doing this time and not winning by just happen to be lucky to have won, more games than they lose for a change.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting is that despite that horrific first-year start, Dan Campbell hit the 500 mark last night, which the Lions are including the playoffs last year, the Lions are 23-8 in their last 31 games. That's a winning percentage of 750. I mean, that's if that's not that's not, you don't fluke into that kind of winning percentage. Not over 2+ years, and I think that's really what it really says volumes about where this team is now. As Nick says, they're not fluking themselves into wins. And as you mentioned too, Greg, this is a team for the most part that are. I mean, how many times did the Lions kneel down at a victory to end the game last year? Several. That, as you mentioned, that's something we'd never ever see with this team. And it's just, I don't want to put the cart before the horse and all that, but this team, it looks like the floor for this team looks like, at the very least, the floor for this team is maybe a second round playoff exit. That's at least what I'm thinking. But obviously anything can happen in the playoffs, an injury, one weird game, and the season's over. But this team has an extremely high floor, which makes for an extremely high ceiling, and that obviously that high ceiling is this is a legit Super Bowl winning caliber team. And I can't believe I'm saying that.
Well, the thing is that if they play that NFC Championship game at Ford Field, they win. Yeah, I'm convinced of it. So what they need to do, they know this.
They would have had that if it wasn't for that damn Dallas game.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything.
Relitigate that, right?
I'm not saying anything here that's earth shattering. But if they get home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs, they will go. They will
with that.
Go
that is an insane home field advantage they have
now. There seems to be something about they having this belief that now you can, sometimes you can, maybe push that a little bit too far and say, well, we'll always come back and pull this thing out. But they do have this ability at home, especially, to just, when push comes to shove at the end of the game, they can get the job done. If they get home field, that's what they're playing for. They know that. If they because they could have squeezed out one more win last year, and they had that NFC Championship game in Detroit instead of out west, I don't think they would have blown it in the second half. I really don't.
Right.
And some weird things happen, and weird things can happen at home just like they can happen on the road. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced that game, had it been played in Detroit, would have gone the Lions' way. So having said that, I think they know that's why this regular season means so much. It's not just, hey, let's just stamp our tickets to the playoffs right here in week 1 and we'll see in January. No.
Right. They
need to win in as many games as they can to assure themselves home field. There's no one that's going to beat them in Detroit in the playoffs. I just don't think so. Yeah. I mean, of course it could happen, but I don't see it happening because it just don't. So I think that given what happened last year, they come into if the road to the Super Bowl goes through Detroit, the Lions are going to go. The Lions are going.
Yeah, and the other thing, Nick, is that the division took a weird turn this first week, or even going back to preseason. Vikings lost J.J. McCarthy for the season with a knee injury. They're starting Sam Darnold, of all people. Sam Darnold's best known for getting mono more than anything else at this point. I'm sure you know the image I'm talking about. And then Green Bay looks like they've lost Jordan Love for 4 to 6 weeks, and Love didn't even look that good before he got hurt in that Philly game. And then the Bears, that might have been one of the weirdest wins you'll ever see. Their rookie quarterback threw for like 100 yards, and yet they won the game thanks to 2 pick sixes and a blocked punt. But their offense looked like he looked like a rookie quarterback starting his first game, no matter how good Caleb Williams might end up being. So, remember the situation, Greg, when the Lions had that wide open division for them when I think it was Aaron Rodgers was hurt and the Lions were up and then they collapsed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't see that.
Which year was that?
That would have been
15 or 16.
15 or 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember they ended up losing like their last 4 or 5 games, and this went to shit.
Yeah.
But the division is wide open. The Lions can just take this division by the neck over
Right.
the first 6 weeks or so. Well, actually, they have a bye week, I think, in week 5. So the first 5, like probably the first month to 6 weeks, they can get a stranglehold in this division because the other teams, obviously, like the Bears, are going to take a while to gel. And then the other 2 teams are in flux at quarter. The Packers are going to start Malik Willis. Oh my God, that guy is not good. And the Vikings have weapons, but Sam Darnold is Sam Darnold. So the window is there. The window is wide, goddamn open right now, and they just have to storm through it. And I sure as hell hope they do.
Well, they're not playing to win the division. They're playing to win the NFC.
But you got to. If you want home field, you're gonna have to win the division.
They're right, but that's their goal is not. I mean, yes, you're right. They have to win the division first, but they are playing to win the NFC in the regular season, so they don't have to play a road playoff game.
Yeah, and get that bye week.
Yep, right, and get the bye week.
Yeah,
get the bye week.
Yeah. All right, before we start wrapping things up, Nick, anything else you want to bring up about the Lions? And obviously, they're next Sunday, 1:00, they're taking on Baker Mayfield, who is making the Browns eat so much crow right now. But they're taking on Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks next week. Anything you want to add about the Lions before we move on?
At this point, no. I mean, they played a solid game. They won it, but it's hard to read too much more into this game as it relates to future games, to be honest. So a lot of things could happen. I mean, but they have a good chance of winning. I can't see why not.
Yeah. But I guess, Greg, one other thing I would say is it's quite possible that the Lions may have played the best quarterback they'll face all season on Sunday compared to what the rest of the schedule looks like.
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
Greg's still pondering. He's not sure. All right, with that, though, let's move on to the Tigers as we kind of hit the home stretch on the podcast. Hey, guys, were we a little too quick in running them off? They are 21-14 since August 1st when they seemingly waved the white flag. They traded Jack Flaherty, Mark Cannon, Carson Kelly. They lost Reese Olson to injury. They cut Gio Ursula, and Javi Baez got placed on the 60-day DL with a major back injury or hip injury. I think it's a hip injury, but which might actually could argue be as an improvement. But regardless of all that, it really felt like the Tigers waved the white flag at the trade deadline because all they picked up was a lot of prospects in return. Yet, with 18 games left to play in the season, they are 3.5 games back of the Twins. The Twins are 5 games under 500 since August 1st, but they have 19 games left to play. And for the last wild card, the Tigers are actually tied with the Mariners at 73-71, and the Red Sox are a half a game back at 72-71. I don't know, but the playoffs they're still a long shot. I think their best odds I've seen are they're around 7 to 9% chance of making the playoffs. But considering how we were so down on this team 8 weeks ago, all of a sudden they're playing entertaining baseball. They're doing it in one of the weirdest ways you'll ever see, with essentially a starting rotation of 2 pitchers.
Right
now, and the offense is average at best, but somehow they pieced enough pieces together here, and they're playing a ton of youth right now. There's the entire infield is young players at this point. It's actually become it could be a very entertaining September. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, they have too much to make up. That's a lot to make up with a lot of low time, and they got 2 other teams that you have to leapfrog. And for that matter, the Twins own the tiebreaker, so you have to beat the Twins. You can't just tie the Twins. So essentially, they're realistically 4.5 back, not 3.5 back. But I don't know about you guys, but this might be an interesting September just for the fact that they aren't mathematically eliminated, and they probably won't be for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's true. All that is true. I did a little math in my head. I think they're like 34-23 in their last 57 games. It's like a 60% clip that's a decent amount of games. 57 games is like, I think since the All-Star break, they're right around the playing 600 ball or in the high 500s ball since the All-Star break. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You look at them and you're not really impressed by anything. There's not really much going on there. They got a lot of young guys, like you said. You hit the nail on the head with the weird. Every other game is a bullpen game with the starting. The starter comes in, pitches an inning. I look at the box scores on my phone and I see that the starter has pitched 1.1 inning, and then the bullpen takes over. That's got to change. By the way, but. Yeah, I mean, there's not much going on there. You look at they got some young guys, Parker Meadows, Keith, and this kid Sweeney, and they got Malloy, and there's a lot of young kind of question mark guys, but they're all kind of hanging around, and that's what's great about baseball, really. I mean, is that you can do that in baseball. You can hang around for a long time and just kind of, especially with this extended wild card, and we could debate whether or not that's good for baseball or not. But the bottom line is they would not be hanging around if they didn't have this extended wild card situation. But they do.
Which is what MLB wanted.
MLB wanted it, and here we are. Yeah, and so you're right. I mean, they're like 4 games behind the loss column, and you mentioned the not having the tiebreaker with the Twins, and but as far as mathematics go, it's probably going to be a couple weeks before the nail is probably going to be finally put in the coffin. But, hey, there's no way that I would have told you come last mid-July when we were all together that they would be going this deep into September without being mathematically eliminated. I pegged them for 75 wins, 77 tops. They're probably going to exceed that. They got 73 already. They'd have to go in the tank to get 75 at this point. So, they'll probably finish right around 500. Good for them. But we've been teased before. We were teased in 21. They finished kind of strong in 21 with a kind of arguably with a worse roster than they have now. But they finished strong in 21. That was the Akil Baddoo year. We all thought Baddoo was going to be something. And then they fell apart in 2022 after signing Javi and so on. And then, getting Austin Meadows and so on. They fell apart in 2022. So, we've been here before, but if nothing else, these kids are getting some much needed experience, and they're getting it in games that matter. And people don't want to maybe admit this, but there's a difference between playing games in September when you're 45 games out and playing games in September when they've got your name listed in the wild card race. And it's good for them. They're not going to do it probably, but it's good for them to go to the ballpark now. They've got 18 games to play. They win maybe 12 of them. They can make things interesting. They got the Rockies coming in who are horrible. I think the worst team, one of the worst teams in the National League. You got the Rockies coming in here for 3 games. They might, probably should win 2 out of those 3. You win 12, go 12-6, get 85 wins. I don't know. I mean, it could come down the last week of the season.
And that's the thing, you get to the mid 80s win wise, and the Twins are not lighting the world on fire. And
neither the Royals.
Neither are the Royals. I mean, 85, 86 wins, and you might still be in it in the last week if that's what you're trending to. And I kind of with Greg here that they aren't going to make the playoffs. If they do, it's probably going to take a miracle at this point. And there's no game 163 anymore. There's just scheduled tiebreakers. But I'm still kind of dumbfounded that we were so down on this team, yet they didn't fold. They had every opportunity, they had every reason to just wave the white flag. The players especially just wave the white flag, ride out the rest of the season. And see, and then they'll figure it out in the off season. But with all these, with all these young guys, it's like they don't know any better that they're supposed to lose. I guess is the best way to put it.
I've been thinking about this team, and now that they're actually being competitive, my real reaction to that is. For those who are following the team this year, and I decided not to because I just felt like even the front office didn't give a shit enough to put out a competitive team and be seriously competitive. But to those who are following it, watching them win is good baseball. It's fun. It's fun to watch your team when you think they have a chance to win every night. And in any sport, not just baseball. But,
Right.
Back in June, people were like fuming because the front office didn't try to get any offense, and the offense was like non-existent.
Right.
I think that was happening last year too, and there was it's just this bipolar offense. For a while it's no good, and then all of a sudden it catches fire towards the end of the season. Heck, it even goes on an individual level with Spencer Torkelson. Like, he couldn't even make contact with the baseball, and all of a sudden he's ripping home runs left and right. But my question is, what do you have here? The front office signaled, we're going to try and be competitive as long as we can. It's I don't know what the hell to do with that as a fan at all. Does that mean anything for next year? I can't tell. It's hard for me to get excited, because it's just, unless you're just sitting there enjoying the moment and enjoying decent baseball, I don't know what else to think about this team at all. Are they planning to build on whatever success they had this year? I don't know. Scott Harris seems to have an allergic reaction to signing a free agent that actually helps. Or making a trade. I don't think he knows how to make a good trade, which we've talked about too. So it's hard for me to tell. But they're playing well. Enjoy it. Yeah, they could be technically over 500, and then next year do who knows what. Honestly, I literally don't know what to do with this team. I think it's easier when a team really sucks. That they really suck, and your expectations are right there and nowhere else. So, but
it is kind of confusing to see what's going on here, and that really what's the front office going to do next year? Because it looks like they have guys that they can build around. I mean, my God, Parker Meadows is actually turning into the kind of player that people thought he could be. He doesn't need to hit for a great average with his defense. He just needs to hit like Kevin Kiermaier. And he's showing that pop because he plays elite defense out there. But there's still a lot of questions, though. Is Colt Keith the future second baseman, or are they going to be better off moving in the first? Is Jace Young, is he going to be can he play good enough defense to be a third baseman? Is Trey Sweeney the shortstop of the future? Probably not. I don't know. Can he hit enough? Dylan Dingler, he's probably going to be at least the backup next year, but is a Rogers Dingler catching duo good enough? I don't know. I'm with Nick on this. It's really hard to say, especially because they don't have any true veterans mixed in with right now they're playing almost all young guys, except for there's Matt Vierling and a couple other guys. So I don't know. It's fun right now. They're winning games. They're winning some. I hate to put it, Greg, but there are some unsustainable things about this, like the Parker Meadows 2-strike, 2-out grand slam to beat Oakland, and they're winning.
Beat San Diego. Beat San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego. That's right.
And a 101 mile per hour pitch, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. They won Sunday 2-1. On another bullpen day, and that's the other thing. As interesting as it is to see them over the past 6 weeks or so patch together a pitching staff with this opener, bulk innings, relievers. Yeah, you're right, Greg. It's not sustainable. It really that's a big question mark with this team. Yet it is so weird that they literally have the Cy Young favorite in Tarek Skubal, and yet then the rest of the team, essentially a bunch of guys that they're just throwing at people, and they're actually pulling stuff off. But I guess that should be worth noting is that Skubal is the overwhelming, at this point, AL Cy Young favorite. At least he should be. He leads the AL in pitching Triple Crown stats. The last Tiger to do that was Justin Verlander, and he leads in wins at 16, at ERA at 2.53, and strikeouts at 208. So this really is a weird season. Nick's onto something here. We don't know. It's still hard to make it what this team is, Greg and Nick. Yet they're going to have a guy who's probably going to win the Cy Young, and they're probably going to finish over 500. And they weren't trying to do that.
Right. You know what? What you're probably going to see, it'd be kind of fascinating to see what the national pundits have to say about this team come February when everybody reports back to spring training. I'd be interested to see where they land, where the Tigers land in the preseason prognostications, because I think you're going to see them all over the place. I think you're going to see them picked as, well, nobody's going to be picked lower than the White Sox, but they may be picked as low as fourth and as high as first, because what you guys just both said, they're at a weird time right now in their development. It could go either way. There's so much youth, like you said, Al, and there's not that. I think their veteran leadership guy is Matt Vierling. He's 28 years old. He doesn't have a lot of experience, although he was in the World Series a couple of years ago. But there's not that really to hang their hat on. They don't have that guy. All teams have that veteran guy or a couple of guys. Even the '84 team had those older guys, even beyond the core of Trammell and Whitaker and Parrish and Gibson. There was the Darrell Evanses of the world, and guys like that who were the older guys that you need. I mean, you need those kind of guys to be around, and they don't have that. They don't have that. I'm not saying you have to have that, but it sure does help to have that kind of presence on your team. And they've got to patch together a starting rotation. And they know that. I mean, I'm sure they do, but they need to bring in. They were decimated by Mize got hurt. They traded Flaherty. Maeda was a bust. Those are three pieces of the rotation that just aren't here right now. They're just, Mize is here technically, and so is Maeda, but they're not really part of the mix. They're not really
Reese
doing
Olson
anything.
as well. Yeah, that's four guys actually. Reese
Right,
Olson,
right, exactly, right. And then you've got guys like Manning, who I'm not sure is ever going to make it. Then we hear about Jackson Jobe, another question mark. So I'm interested to see how they're looked at by the national media next year. I think you're going to see them picked all over the place in that division, and they should be picked all over the place because that division's so weird. Yeah. That division is so weird.
You got Kansas City doing what they're doing.
Teams go up and down in that division like crazy. There's not one team that just is consistently good year after year after year. Last year, the Guardians weren't even very good. Now they're good. The Twins, I can't even predict the Twins from year to year. They're nuts. I'm not sold on the Royals. This could be another one of those bob up to the surface years for the Royals, and next year they're back to 70 wins again. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, there's nobody in that division that you can really say, okay, if you pick 10 baseball experts and ask them to pick the top four teams in that division, because everybody's going to pick the White Sox fifth. You pick the top four teams in that division, you get maybe 9 or 10 different answers. I don't think anybody can agree on how that division is going to shake out next year. And the Tigers, I think, are going to be one of the hardest teams to handicap. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can't figure them out right now. God forbid we don't. And as Nick keeps reminding us, they have a front office that really doesn't have a track record yet, or the only track record they have right now is essentially a very badly bungled trade, and a lot of trades of guys who weren't going to be here long term anyway with the deals they made this year. As much as Flaherty staying here might have been nice, but they did get some decent pieces for him. But it's what a conundrum. It's like with this team, they're a mystery wrapped inside of an enigma or something like that, I guess is the best way to put it. But it's kind of like we have Nick at one side, there's me on the other side, and Greg kind of here in the middle when it comes with the Tigers right now. And that pretty much nails how everybody feels about this team. I don't know where I'm going with this team, but that's Nick. That's kind of what the Tigers are. I don't know where they're going and what's going on and what's going to happen with this team, and it kind of leaves me kind of grasping as to what's next.
Well, that's just it. Kind of adding to sort of what I was saying earlier, and then you mentioned Flaherty. Yeah. So you're going into the trade deadline. They get rid of a good pitcher, and they pick up some more minor leaguers I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And but which kind of tells you like they're not trying to play for a playoff spot at that time. So that even at the end of July, they weren't even trying to go for a playoff spot. So it seems like even if they're them being in the hunt is almost like it happened by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the team, not like the front office and the coaching staff is trying to go as far as they can into the playoffs. It's like it just happened that way. So it's like I really can't tell. Despite my negative viewpoint of the front office, I just can't tell what's going on with these guys.
Yeah.
What I should think about these guys, because it's not like they're building and they're kind of like improving little by little every year. It's just kind of the same thing every year. Mm-hmm. I hate to say this, but it's not like the Lions who they reach a certain level. Now they're going to try and kick it up to the next level. Right. Or even the Red Wings too. The Red Wings are doing that as well. It's like, okay, we got this far. Let's try and go a little farther now. The Tigers, I just have no idea what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to watch them, to be honest, except for living in the moment. They just happen to be doing well.
Exactly. And I think with that, that's probably a good place to kind of start wrapping things up here when it comes to this podcast. We're all kind of confused.
What's new?
More than usual.
More than usual. Right.
So that seems like a good point to, I guess, have our jerk of the week. So, Nick, I'll let you go first. Who's your jerk of the week? I'm
going to go with one that it's probably not made a lot of news, but I saw this for a while ago. Is in the WNBA. What's her name? Angel Reese, the rookie out of she plays for Chicago, I think.
Yeah.
There was a video clip of her wearing a Detroit Pistons Dennis Rodman jersey.
Right. Yeah.
And she happened to be wearing it backwards. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, whatever. But so what? As far as I'm concerned, she's got Rodman in the good years, so she's good in my book.
Right.
There's a lot of idiots out there just were roasting her for wearing that jersey backwards. And just some very mean stuff over something so absolutely benign and irrelevant in the grand scheme of anything. Mm-hmm. But they made a lot of mean comments over that for nothing. And my jerk of the week are those people that are making those mean comments. It's just uncalled for. It's just some 22-year-old kid wants to wear a basketball jersey backwards. Who cares?
Right.
Who cares?
Yep.
So
yep, I'm with you. Yeah, I agree.
All right, Greg, your jerk of the week. Who you got?
My jerk of the week is not an individual, but an organization, and that is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have hitched their train to Deshaun Watson in which is some people are calling the absolute worst contract in the history of the NFL. Absolutely untradeable, absolutely a salary cap nightmare for the Browns, and Watson has not performed anywhere near, of course, the contract. Forget about being disgusted about Watson as a person, the things that he's done as a person. But the Browns, I've got a couple of Browns fans that I know on Facebook, and when they signed Watson, even the Browns fans I know on Facebook were disgusted. They didn't want this guy anywhere near their team, anywhere near their organization for all the baggage that he brings. And then on top of that, to give him that kind of coin, and then on top of that, he sinks up the joint. He was absolutely horrible against the Cowboys yesterday in Week 1. Horrible. And they're stuck with this guy. They're stuck with him. I mean, yeah, they could put the backup in. Yeah, that's true. But, my gosh, they're paying him. I don't know how. It's been restructured. Apparently the contract's been restructured to the point where even the Browns wanted to cut bait on him today. It would still kill their cap space for like 3 or 4 years.
Their cap would be 2/3
and
of their cap.
And it's so we talk a lot about same old Lions and stuff. Mm-hmm. The Browns are much better. The Browns have not been much better. They're the only other team in the that were around in the NFL before the merger, other than the Lions, who have not made the Super Bowl. Why? Because they've been poorly run, for just like the Lions have been for many, many years. Now, what they've done now with this Watson thing, the Browns actually have a window of opportunity. They're not a bad team, really, if they can figure out the quarterback situation.
Flacco did with them last year.
Yeah, if they can, if they're pulling this Watson stuff at the worst possible time. They had a window of opportunity where the Browns could have done something, made some noise in the AFC. And now they've got this Watson situation, which they can't get themselves out from under. I mean, they're stuck with him for the most part. They are. Even if they don't want to play him, they kills their cap, so they can't do a lot of maneuvering with the roster at a time where they could do a lot of things with the roster and be an elite team in the AFC. They got a great defense. They got the best defensive player in the AFC in Garrett, and maybe the whole league in Garrett, and they don't. And this Watson, I don't know. It just shows you that there are some organizations that still haven't figured it out. And the Browns had something good going, and they screwed it up.
Yep. And for what it's worth, Greg, late this afternoon, there was another sexual assault lawsuit filed against Deshaun Watson.
Are you serious? This afternoon?
I am serious. Yeah, it was filed late this afternoon. The plaintiff claims Watson sexually assaulted her in her home in October 2020. And so yeah,
Jesus.
So it's it's not funny, but yet it's hilarious if you know what I'm saying. That what the Browns did to themselves, it literally shot themselves in the foot over and over and over until there's nothing but a nub left, essentially. So
I gotta say,
yeah.
Even under William Clay Ford would never have rolled the dice on Watson with that kind of.
No.
Yeah.
That would not have happened.
And yet look what the Lions did with what's his name last offseason, or the defensive back that they cut. The quarterback that. Yeah, CJG. Yeah, him exactly. They said, fuck this noise. You're gone. You know. So, but yeah, that's the thing is, this is one of those where the Browns, as Greg said, the Browns have made their bed. Now they got to lay in it when it comes to Watson. You know, that's a horrible analogy, but it's true when it comes to it. Good call on that. And
Yeah. Wow.
This is the cherry on top of the latest sexual assault accusation against them. So, my jerk of the week is going to be a little less
Did we lose Al?
serious.
Al's frozen.
Oh,
I still see him.
Can you hear?
Well, I see him.
You're good on my side.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Greg, you've been
I don't hear him or see him.
So
there we go.
All right. My jerk of the week isn't going to be quite so serious. And mine is Cherry Bradshaw, who should have been sent out to pasture several years ago.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess yesterday he really
Please don't tell me he kissed somebody against their will again.
No, nothing like that. But you guys do know that Caleb Williams, it's well known at this point that he paints his fingernails he did it at USC.
Okay.
And he would paint them in colors that would help fire him up when he can paint the opposition's nails. Or I think this time he painted his nails in Bears colors and things like that.
Okay.
Something he's always done.
Yeah.
Well, Terry Bradshaw. Now he did. And Kurt Menefee just said when they brought this up, his nails said the Bears on it with his number on it. And Kurt Menefee said, if you look good, you feel good, you play good. And he has moved on. But then later on, Terry Bradshaw had to chime in with, what if I had played with painted fingernails in 1970 back on this side and back on this black and the gold and the other side? That would have, essentially, he was going to rip him to shreds about it. And thankfully, other heads prevailed, specifically his co-host, Howie Long, jumped in to stop him. And the funny line is, Long said, I was hoping you would just stop and not even think about that. And then Bradshaw jumped back in saying, I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just, and oh my God. If there is one pregame show, guys, that desperately needs to be shaken up, it's the Fox show. Terry Bradshaw is just, it's sad to see what he's turned into. Jimmy Johnson, does he even do anything on that show anymore? If there's one pregame show that desperately needs to be shaken up, it's that one. And much of it stems from they have essentially Abe Simpson at the desk and Terry Bradshaw. Now, what's the big deal of someone painting their nails? And it's 2024 for Christ's sake. It's not 1970, Terry. But so my jerk of the week is Terry Bradshaw, and for that matter, Fox for keeping it together that geriatric.
That's a good call. I didn't think about that. I when I say I didn't think about that, I didn't think about that whole show as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, Bradshaw for sure. I agree with you there. Yeah. But you're right. That show is. Yeah, you're right. Because I think about the CBS show, and they brought in Matt Ryan now.
Yeah, exactly.
They got. There was another new face I saw. Watt is down there now.
Right.
Guys that just recently retired. And you're right. Even Howie Long. I mean, you don't think of Howie Long as being an old guy, but he was playing in the
early 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
So his career at Bradshaw's overlapped actually. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Hell, Howie Long's son retired from football already.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
So
that's true.
And then don't get me going on the NBC pregame show that it's a cast of thousands on that show. And why is Tony Dungy still on my television? That's another guy who should no longer be on TV.
Right.
He's 110 years old at this point with very problematic views on things. So
I want Chris Collinsworth banned.
Yeah.
God, I can't stand that guy whatsoever.
And why is his son on TV?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know because he's his son.
Kid. Yeah. Talk about a nepo baby. That's it right there. So I guess I could maybe I could change my my jerk of the week to all the goddamn pregame and postgame shows.
Did you get a chance to listen to Tom Brady, by the way?
No,
I had it on the Red Zone, so I heard it in bits and pieces. He was Greg Olson's 100 times better. It was rough.
I hope he gets better, but
the thing is, he doesn't have the voice for television.
You know what? Didn't we all kind of? I feel like we all kind of said. I don't know when we said it about Brady being on TV. Didn't we all kind of say I'm not buying it because I don't think he's all that interesting or all that has much of a personality. I think we all kind of said that. Mm-hmm. And I listened to a little bit of the Browns game, Cowboys game, and he just was. It's his first game. It's just let's see how it goes. But you're right about the voice, and that's the first thing you hear, of course.
Yeah,
is not so much what he's saying, but the voice.
You're right.
And I don't know.
That's not a small thing, though. It's not like he can change his voice. So
right. Right.
And, I would just add also, I think the best line I saw about Brady was, now you know the reason why Peyton Manning was doing TV ads and Tom Brady was doing print ads. and it makes sense.
That's true.
Peyton Manning has a presence about him that when it comes to that Tom Brady, at least right now, doesn't. Let alone the fact that Tom Brady looks like a male model. You can tell he's had work done. He looks completely different than the guy that left Michigan 20 years ago. So, we could do an entire episode just on the media. One of these days we might just do that. But with that, I think we have our jerks out of the way. I think with that, it's time to start wrapping things up. So, Greg, as usual, if you could get out the thank yous and the social media stuff and all that fun things.
Absolutely. First of all, obviously, thank you to Ken Kal for joining us on his annual. Now it's kind of becoming an annual thing where he joins us.
Maybe biannually if you thought about coming back in the half.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah, I was glad to hear that. Yeah, so he comes on and before the season starts, we talk hockey and he loves it. We love it. Thanks to Ken. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter at KenKalDRW. By the way, follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and of course, please subscribe to my Substack, gregeno.substack.com, and you'll get new content every Monday, sometimes even on Thursday, depending on what kind of mood I'm in. I want to thank my lovely wife, Sharon, and of course, thank you, Big Al and Nick, for making, in this case, Monday nights so gosh darn fun.
All right, it's time for Nick to promote whatever the hell he wants to promote, which is usually his Twitter.
Yes, and so I'm probably the only social media I hang out at is Twitter, and I'm going to continue calling it Twitter, and I'm at Nick Milanovich. I love talking Detroit sports, and there's a bunch of guys that are living in Michigan, no longer living in Michigan, all still following Detroit sports and rooting for the teams, come join the conversation. And the one thing I will say is, if you disagree with one of us, that's fine. Don't be a jerk to us. We had a couple of people recently that were really jerks to others in a couple of the strings. And it's just,
On Twitter, you mean?
Yeah. They kind of went like over the limit and insulting people. Not swearing, but still insulting. It's like, no, we can disagree, go back and forth.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Right.
But, keep it civil and friendly. Because this is sports. It's bullshit at the end of the day. We do this for fun.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Yes, exactly. And as always, if you we would really much appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe when it comes to the Knee Jerks podcast. If you want to listen to us or you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, we're found anywhere podcasts are aggregated. If you look, search for the podcast, you will find us on places like Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, Ghana. The kneejerks.net is our homepage where you will find all the links to the things we've talked about, like links to the social media that Greg and Nick have talked about. This links to Greg's Substack, which he forgets to pimp. Greg, what is the address of your Substack? How do people want to subscribe?
It's gregeno.substack.com. Exactly. And it's on if you're watching this on YouTube, it's on my graphic there.
Exactly. And also the kneejerks.net, where you can download the MP3 to do with what you will. But again, we'd appreciate if you comment, if you'd like, subscribe, spread the word. And also, we appreciate you being patient with us taking 6 weeks off, because we had a hell of a lot going on in our personal lives during that time. Lots to do, lots of things going on, but we're ready for football. And as long as we don't talk about Michigan, we should be fine. Or Eastern, for that matter, who didn't have a good weekend either.
No, it was a rough one.
Oh God, the less I think about that Texas game, the better. So, oh my God, I have a feeling we maybe end up talking about what in the hell's going on in Ann Arbor very, very soon. But we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. But that means we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll likely have. Oh hell, we may be talking about a playoff place with the Tigers. We'll have more Lions talk. And the Wings will be in training camp. It'll be almost upon the same time for the Pistons, so there'll be a lot going on. So until that time, 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Good night, guys.
And, of course, Greg Eno.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.